Okay. Do a roll call for SWAC members. Paul Bertagna,
Here.
Luke Dines. Ron Shear, you're the unofficial proxy for the services. Jared Black. Keith Caceres. Keith was supposed to be. Chris Ogren.
I'm here virtually, if you can hear me.
We can hear you. Thank you, Chris. Erwin. Present. Bill Durden. Cassie Lacey. Mike Riley. And Robin Bora. So we have Paul Bertagna, Chris Ogren, Aaron Swetna, Mike Riley are present. Did I miss anybody on the SWAC?
Chad, I'm available. Keith Caceres, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Keith. Okay, great, thank you. We have 5 members present. We do not have a quorum. So hopefully somebody will be logging in or arriving shortly.
There we go.
Robin Bora. We do have a quorum. Thank you, Robin. So I want to start with review and comments on the meeting in January, excuse me, December. Any comments?
I think I sent Sue a note that she used the word militant when I said Hampton.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Cassie Lees is here. Sue, did you receive comments from Robin Bora on the minutes for December?
She's outside of the home, very directed.
Sue is?
Oh, she's not.
Susanna.
I did. And there was a one word request change so that it reads, he wonders about the state-owned lands and BLM-owned parcels being controversial and asked if we could make, or if we could take the sites near, instead of Milliken, it would be Hampton out of consideration now. So the change is changing it from Milliken to Hampton.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or changes to the minutes, corrections? Motion to approve as modified.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
I'll second.
So Robin moved for approval and I didn't catch you motion for second. Besides Erwin.
Chris Ogren, it's fine if everyone wants to do it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Minutes are approved as amended. We want to start the presentation with a statement that Tim Brunel and I have prepared. So Tim, I'd like you to take a look.
Yeah, and to folks online, the back of my head may be to you. It's so that it'll get to the microphone. You'll be able to hear the comments. So good morning and welcome to the January meeting of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, referred to as the SWAC. The staff of the Solid Waste Department wants to begin with again thanking the SWAC members for your time and efforts in this process, and express our appreciation for their willingness to engage in a process that is a public-facing component that at times will be contentious. And we want to welcome and thank the members of the public who are in attendance today, either in person or via Zoom, and to all those who have provided comments in regards to this process and this project. All of us working on this effort want to begin with the acknowledgement that this process is already having profound effects on many residents of this extraordinary county. And your concerns for your communities, your families, your health, and the natural resources are being heard and being felt. This is a task and a process that is unprecedented for the staff, this committee, and the county. Solid waste landfill siting processes are rare throughout the country, never mind in Deschutes County. Not landfill was not originally cited through a formal process, but was a convenient location in the landscape outside of town and far enough away to be a dump. In that era, there were dumps within the town of Bend and throughout the county. By the 1970s, the hazards of upwards of 100,000 dumps across the country were becoming known and beginning to be closed. By the 1990s, new federal guidelines for engineered sanitary landfills were enacted, dictating how landfills had to meet new standards and regulations to ensure best practices and health for the design and construction and operation for new facilities and new portions of existing landfills. Not Landfill was the one facility in the county that transitioned from an unlined landfill into a fully lined sanitary landfill in the mid-1990s. In 2018, the county convened the SWAC to develop a new solid waste management plan that examined the solid waste management system in Deschutes County and developed a plan and recommendations for how to manage the solid waste system for the next 20 years and beyond. Included in that process was the recognition that Not Landfill would be closing by the end of this decade, and disposal of waste would still need to occur. The process examined the options for the management of our waste, including incineration, exporting and hauling of waste to distant landfills, examining new alternate technologies for processing and or recovering waste, and locating a new landfill within the county. Among a variety of recommendations that were approved, in addition to substantial increases in waste production, recycling, and recovery, was the recommendation that Deschutes County maintain responsibility for waste generated in this county and requiring disposal through the siting of a new landfill that could meet the needs of the county for the next 100 years. The charge of the SWAC is to conduct a process to review and determine what are the technically viable sites within the county that could meet that need. The process of determining what sites are technically viable is an exhaustive one, and simply put, establishes where current zoning codes allow a facility to be sited while meeting regulatory and technical requirements. These include limits regarding, amongst other considerations, geologic conditions, wildlife restrictions, proximity to wetlands, drinking water wells, groundwater, and airports. This is where the process intersects with conflicting perspectives, or more clearly stated, where a technical siting process intersects with public policy. The work of the SWAC is simply to identify the sites that best meet the regulatory and technical requirements for a landfill. Admittedly, within this process, there are elements of long-term operating costs that are identified, such as proximity to the primary points of generation, but those are relatively minor in the scoring compared to all the other elements under consideration. This committee is being asked by the county to identify the sites that best meet all of these elements. Current zoning within the county allows for the siting of a landfill to be within a quarter mile of a residence. The SWAC therefore has those guidelines as to sites they can consider, or when or if a site can be eliminated. The sites under current consideration initially met that and all other qualifying technical considerations through the broad screening process. Now the group is going through a finer process to see if those initial findings and or assumptions are in fact correct. Also, parcel owners of any remaining candidate sites that are not owned by the county are being contacted to determine their interest or willingness to continue to participate in the process. Many of you are here because you do not feel that a facility should be located near where you live. That is understandable and it is understood. And for the multitude of reasons that is, and as are the multitude of reasons that is concerning to you. Those reasons of proximity are a public policy issue that this committee and process can hear and document. However, it is an issue that will need to be addressed in a different part of the process under permitting, or addressed by the Board of County Commissioners directly, or by being given different direction to this committee in regards to public policy pertaining to concerns such as proximity to residences, groundwater wells, recreation areas, wildlife habitat, or other areas of impact that they have policy oversight of. And finally, we as a staff want to acknowledge the impacts that this process may have had on you in regards to how we have communicated this effort and attempted to move it forward. Our goal and intention has been to be transparent, inclusive, and accessible. We've used these as our guidelines in our outreach and in the design of our process. We have heard from many folks that they've been unaware or blindsided by this issue and are angry, fearful, concerned, and or upset. And we are truly sorry if that is your experience of us and our process. We will continue to work to improve this process as we move forward. However, we also have to explain that this is a committee process that is not governed in the same manner as a formal land use authorization or permitting process. In the coming months, this committee will provide recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners on how to potentially move forward with a few selected sites. Those sites will be investigated further to determine which one site is best suited to meet the needs of the county over the next 100 years. At that time, the formal public process will begin in regards to permitting and land use. We anticipate that this whole process will take 15 to 18 months in order to get to that one landfill site. For today, we anticipate that we may have up to 60 minutes for members of the public to provide comment. Based on the number of people that we have here and online, we anticipate that we may not be able to provide the opportunity for everybody to speak. We would ask for those online to submit comments via email to managethefuture@deschutescounty.gov. For those in this room here today, we would also suggest that you provide written comments as well. We will be providing all the written comments that we receive to this committee, as well as to the county commissioners. Any verbal comments received today will be part of the recorded record of these meetings, but they will not be transcribed and submitted in writing to this committee or to the Board of County Commissioners. That's why we ask that you submit comments in writing. That can be through email, it doesn't have to be in a letter. In the event that someone wishing to present comments today cannot be accommodated during the time allotted for this meeting, Chad Santola and I will make ourselves available at our offices this afternoon or at any time that works for our schedule and yours on any other day. And thank you all for attending today.
Thanks, Jim. I want to address one particular comment that has been coming through on a number of emails that we've received. It's regarding an FAA advisory AR FAA advisory AR 21, which was passed under the Board Act. We had consulted with the FAA in December of 2021 regarding that advisory and the Bend and Redmond Airport specifically. And at that time, the FAA did advise us that neither of those airports qualified under that advisory for either grant procurement or technical aircraft usage requirements that qualify under that advisory. We have contacted the FAA again to see if that position has changed, and we have not heard back from them yet. So I just wanted to let you know we are aware of that advisory in the 6-mile radius. We're waiting to see if there's been a change in that status with the FAA at this time. Regarding comments, if we move along and get done, the Board of County Commissioner standard for submitting comments is 3 minutes during board meetings. We have 22 people here, so if my math is right, if we can get done within an hour, we can probably accommodate 3 minutes per person for the 22 people. It's not for comments. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Brian Rudnish with Parametrics.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I'll just provide a brief update here and we'll run through these slides and then there will be time for public comments at the end. So just a brief update on the focus site screening process. As Tim mentioned, we've begun taking a second look at the scoring that was given to the 12 sites, 13 sites selected for focus screening to review and confirm some of those assumptions and the scoring there. But largely what's occurred over the last month since the last meeting is we've been receiving and reviewing all the public input that's been received to Manage the Future email and other points of contact. And we've been addressing those concerns, looking further into the points that have been brought up. In addition, the county's been having several conversations with other agencies such as BLM, the Redmond Airport, and property owners to determine the acquisition potential of the parcels identified. And so before we take a deeper dive into the focus screening process, we'd like to see where some of the chips fall with those discussions, and as that might change the number of sites on the list. Chad, would you like to share a little more on the BLM process and what we're looking at there?
Yeah, so back in 2018, 2019, when we were working on the solid waste management plan, my predecessor and the former county administrator met with the BLM to talk about the possibility of acquiring land that the BLM has identified for disposal. Now, that's their term for passing the land on to public, to other agency ownership. It has nothing to do with landfills. So when we took a look at it, when they took a look at that and met with them, it was determined that there were no sites that were viable, and so the process stopped at that point. In the past few months, I have been looking at and having discussions with the BLM as well as one of the county commissioners regarding this. We don't have the tenure map.
That's it.
Was that the tenure map? Oh, right, there's so, yeah, very hard to see on this. So there's a number of sites that the BLM has identified for disposal. Those sites fell out of consideration because either they were in the fatal flaw exclusion zones, or were simply too small or inappropriately shaped to accommodate our needs. We also took a look at zone 2, which is land they've identified potentially for conveyance, and there were similar challenges there. Tim Burnell and I have met with Commissioner Phil Chang. He will be meeting with Senator Wyden in February to discuss this, to see if there's a way to move this process along with other parcels that the BLM may have available for us here. The one thing I did mention that when I was talking with BLM, the challenge we have right now, even if we had a zone 3 parcel that was available for disposal, was that conveyance process takes anywhere from 6 to 10 or more years to accomplish. That does not work within the timeline that we have for acquiring a new facility. We're hoping that Commissioner Chang can be successful with getting something moving through the process a little more quickly, as well as identify potential parcels that the BLM might be willing to exchange that are not in the zone 3 or zone 2 tenures for the BLM.
So Chad?
Yeah.
So one of those 13 sites is BLM?
There's a small parcel of BLM. It's not actually required to be included in that. I think it's that one right there that you just said. Yeah, that got put into it to get the site in a little bit more desirable shape, but I think the acreage is still acceptable without the BLM acquisition on that. We're just kind of throwing that in to see if we needed that to work for us.
So depending on the outcomes of that, there may be additional land suitable for a landfill that could be considered in the focus screening process, but nothing's been identified.
We are hopeful, but we are dealing with a federal agency. The further up in that food chain you go, the longer, more complicated.
So next, we have a summary of some of the public comments received. Thanks to everyone who's submitted input. Your concerns have been heard loud and clear. What this is a kind of visual summary. It's called a word cloud that kind of demonstrates by the scale of the word, the recurrence of certain themes. And so this one in particular is regarding all sites and comments received. I believe the department recently uploaded a document that summarized the comments that were received and the sites that they were in relation to and some of the concerns. It's in a tabular form. We took that and then mapped some of the categories of concern. And you can see here regarding all sites, kind of how that is distributed. Residents impacts kind of being the one that stands out the most. And then other issues with decreasing kind of recurrence. This word cloud illustrates kind of the concerns brought up in relation to the Bear Creek site. And you can see wildlife, residents impacts, groundwater, traffic, truck access route. Those are some of the major concerns there, along with others that have been heard. And this is as of last Friday. So there's been a massive wave of comments that came in over the weekend. We can provide an updated word cloud for that at a certain point. But this is meant to illustrate that we see and hear concerns related to each site. This one illustrates some of the major concerns with the Rickard site. Let's see if I can minimize this. Residence impacts being a large one, property value being another recurring concern, and groundwater health, et cetera.
Drag it down.
There we go. Yeah. And then the Milliken sites also have a variety of concerns. These are more evenly distributed in their size, and that has, I think, something to do with the copy and paste email that came in. And so you can see some of those recurring consistently. Pine Mountain being a concern with Milliken sites, sage grouse, groundwater, hang gliders, paragliders, residence impacts as well, et cetera. So noise, light is a concern that was brought up. So concerns are being heard loud and clear. So this slide, so what's next? We'll continue with the final screening of the 12 candidate solid waste management facility sites. We'll be gathering additional data, scoring those according to focused siting criteria. We'll also be diving into operations and cost analysis regarding these sites to have an additional level of data to evaluate and compare these sites against each other. In March 2023, we expect to have 3 to 5 sites identified for more extensive evaluation and analysis, which will occur over the following year. And then in spring 2024, the plan is that SWAC will recommend the preferred solid waste management facility site for the Board of County Commissioners to consider. And then in the near terms, we'll have a SWAC meeting next month in February. Similar to this, focus screening updates and public comments. And then SWAC meeting on March 21st, the results of the focus screening process, and then an open house on April 6th.
One thing I'd like to add too is we will be taking your comments and this information to Board of County Commissioners in a board meeting in the next few weeks here. I've got a lot of work to do to get ready for that here, but you know, we stated a couple times your comments, concerns are being heard, they are being documented, and I want to make sure that the commissioners are presented with that information as well. So hopefully for the next couple of weeks, we'll be going before the board.
Would a larger meeting room be available for the next meeting?
You know, my apologies to everybody here. We worked in earnest last week to try to find a larger venue that was available. We were not successful. We found a theater on 2nd Street, but the parking was not that good and only afforded 15 or 20 more seats in it. So we like to stay here. County meeting spaces are in constant use and they're reserved months and months ahead of time here. So we're going to keep looking. But we did try to find a better spot, and I apologize for the type of.
How about the fairgrounds?
That's not a bad suggestion. We actually looked into that, but in the short time we had, we could swing something there.
How about the covered structure at the landfill? That'd be very impactful for what is going to happen to everybody.
So it's open for business right now. It's kind of hard to have.
In addition, in the next few weeks, a story map will be provided to the public through a link on the web pages, and that'll provide visuals of the sites and the process we've gone through, as well as frequently asked questions and whatnot. So keep an eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. Okay. That's all we have for a presentation.
By my math, we have about 4 minutes per person. We'll some of you have consolidated comments that would be helpful. So with that, we'll start with public comments, and Liz Dixon was the first to sign up. We're going to go by the list here.
Do you want us to try to get the podium?
That's entirely up to you.
Yes, please.
It
Okay.
might be better heard by all parties closer to the microphone, so right here.
Oh, what would you like me to? Yeah.
That's
Okay.
Remember my chair was.
No, I'm fine. Okay. Sorry, folks, they're more important. I'm gonna look at that. All right. Good morning. I brought 9 of these, which it looks like that's what I'm gonna need. This is my written submittal, but it's also provided to you so that you can take notes on it, because I will follow it pretty closely. I hope it will be of interest enough to go when I take notes. My name is Liz Dixon. I'm an administrative law attorney, which means I do mostly land use and water law here in Deschutes County with the law firm of Dixon Hatfield. At 400 Southwest Bluff, Suite 240, area code or zip code 97702. I have been contacted by Todd Kane and Nathan Braun, 2 gentlemen who own a 40-acre parcel directly south of the Rickard Road site. But I think it's 18, 13, 15, I think it's by township range and then number. What they asked me to do was not come to you and fight. What they asked me to do was evaluate the site and say, based on the genuine criteria that are likely to be applied, does this site fit or not? And so in the short amount of time that I had available to me, I put together information that I hoped would be helpful to you. Because I know you're getting to the point where you're getting ready to take it down to 3 to 5. So the 3 of all the criteria that I looked at, and you have a tough job, there are a number of applicable criteria, and they are very complex at the federal level, somewhat complex at the state level, and almost non-existent at the county level. But what we found was that there are 3 areas that really jumped out at me that I would like to discuss with you today. And the first one was already mentioned, and that is the airport. In general, the rule says that if you're within 5 miles of an airport, you have to go through a series of hoops. But a specific rule in the federal code that was passed in 2000 says if you're within 6 miles of a small airport, the kind of airport that does, forgive me, I'm not an engineer. I think it's like piston-based or jet-based airplanes and less than 60 passengers, which describes the Bend Airport perfectly. And also they have received federal funding. So the Bend Airport is the more concerning of the 2 airports, because the way that the Congress laid out their findings, they said birds are more damaging to small planes than large ones. So as a result, small airports are of greater concern than large ones, which means as we read the regulations at this point in time, if you're within 6 miles of one runway, one end of the runway at the Bend Airport, you're probably not going to be able to get approval for the run. The Rickard site is about 4.2 to 4.3 miles from the Bend Airport. And so based on my analysis, should not be included going forward. That's my first concern is the airport. My second concern is wildlife issues. And the wildlife issues are a little bit more vague because there's a process right now going on where ODF&W, Andrew Walsh, who is the main biologist in the High Desert office. Andrew Walsh and his compatriots in 2019, and I've included this map in your documents, have revised the maps for wildlife in Deschutes County. And they have found that both elk and deer winter range are going to extend up into the Rickard Road site. It's also immediately adjacent to a significant portion of sage grouse habitat, which is on the BLM, which is just to the east of the subject property. And as we all know, sage grouse pay no attention to fences, so the likelihood that they could be included in this site as well is significant. Also, there was a 2011 COCC capstone paper done, interestingly enough, where they analyzed the Deschutes County property, which was done 711 acres, as opposed to about 740 that it is now. They analyzed that property for a year and came out with an analysis. The capstone paper is included in your documentation. And in that capstone analysis, they said this property should be not degraded, and that was based on county requirements. This property should instead be enhanced for recreational and wildlife use. And it's very well documented. These 9 forest science students did excellent work, and it's already specific information available on the site, so we would encourage you to consider it. The third issue that we identified that we thought was important deals with the issue of hydrology. And as we all know, hydrology in this part of the state is very difficult to understand. And the only real data that we have is from OWRD. So what I've included for you is extensive information about the wells, both in the section of the site itself and the section surrounding it, because as we all know, water flows, it doesn't stay static. What we found was 3 wells that had been deepened immediately adjacent to the Rickard Road site, which means there's already challenge in the aquifer. And also, and I can include more information about this if you want, there is a Dogami analysis and Deschutes County analysis of what was surface mining site 400, which was a site that was considered for mining back, I think in the 1980s. And it is just south and a little bit east of the subject property, which means there's porous soil there. I don't know if it's pumice or 3/4 minus, but there's something there that's worth mining, which means it's very drainable. You will look also at the map I provided, which is the OWRD map, which shows all the wells around the Rickard Road site. And there are approximately 75 of them in the area that I looked at. That's a lot of wells. So we know that there is significant use of the hydrology now. We know that it drains a lot. We know that it would be very sensitive. This is important because landfills need water in order to function. Especially if you have composting going on, they have to use water to keep those fires down. It's not just, it's a static thing with a base under it. Water naturally flows in. And so we would suggest that for those 3 reasons, this is not a suitable site. And we would suggest that you look elsewhere. There's additional information that we can help provide as part of this process. We're happy to do it. We're not here to obstruct. We're here to try to promote the process. Any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Matchnick.
Can we please pause the presentation so the screen is full size?
Please go over and say, just passing around the word. Yeah. In order to get everyone in the room and started, we kind of sidetracked the sign-in sheets for attendees. So we're going to start passing a couple of clipboards around. If you did not sign up when you got here, please fill that out on the clipboard as we pass around. Thank you.
Thank you, and hi, everyone. That actually gave me a moment to catch my breath, because unlike Ms. Dixon, I don't speak in front of public meetings like this very often, so you'll hear some emotion in my voice as I address this committee. And so first, I want to thank you for your work on this necessary and challenging topic. I also want to acknowledge your opening statements and the fact that the county does have a policy of allowing siting of landfills within a 1/4 mile of residences at the moment. And so I'll tell you right now, that's something I'll be working to change.
Yeah.
I have a number of concerns with the current stage of this decision-making process, particularly as they relate to parcel 181315, known as the Rickard Road parcel, to a number of people. These concerns are described in the written comments that I've submitted. I also have a copy to leave with you today. So I want to focus today on some of the minimizing criteria for residential areas that are part of the evaluation, along with some of what I see as errors in some of the site-specific information that's been provided. The presentation of December 20th, 2022 notes that existing adjacent use is residential, that the planned adjacent use is residential, and that there are what's noted as several residences within a 1/4 mile. These considerations in the spreadsheet and in the rubric developed are each just weighted at 1.5% of the entire score. You also get to cite a high positive score based on the statement, no greater sage-grouse zones within 3.1 miles, according to the documents provided. However, the Deschutes County Dial site lists this very parcel as sage-grouse habitat. So we have existing residences providing just 1.5% of the scores you're considering for this site, and what's labeled no sage-grouse zones in documented sage-grouse habitat, incorrectly increasing the site score at a weight of 14%. So I'll say that again, weighting residential areas and weighting approximate residences at 1.5% in the total score, and weighting what I see as an incorrect statement of sage-grouse habitat as 14% of the total score. I think this is a misleading slant to the data. especially with no concern and no communication given to the over 100 residences located within 1 mile of the site. I do want to thank you for your time. I know this is a huge effort, and I look forward to your concurrence that the parcel at 181315 is unsuitable for further consideration as a possible landfill site. So, thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to speak to anyone about them.
Sorry, did you say you're going to be able to provide a written?
I have submitted written comments, and I also have a version here that I can leave with you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Daniel Baca.
Everybody.
Your name again, please?
Daniel Baca. Yep. I'm one of the people that actually received the letter, or very few people that received the letter because I live next to the place. I was here at the last meeting and spoke with everybody. I expressed a series of questions, comments, and concerns for what was going on. I have not received any kind of an answer to any of my questions I've asked you guys, and it's been a month. I was asked specifically by Chad in order to write these down, and emailed them in. I did twice, and I've had no response other than canned response by you guys. I find that highly disrespectful for the entire process that you guys have going on here. That somebody that's been here for a month has no answers. It seems like you guys are trying to rush this process along, and especially in regards to BLM trying, I don't know if it's, you guys are trying to be pushed by a higher power or not, higher up in the food chain as you mention it, and it seems that that's a poor way to do business. I want to kind of talk to you though about water, because that was one of the main things I brought up last time I was here. We live a quarter-mile away from where you guys are going to site this landfill, and there's a number of wells in our location. We're on the Bear Creek Road location. Most cars up in the parking lot can make that distance in 20 seconds from a dead stop. You guys are going to have a landfill there for 100 years. Think about how quickly that water is going to travel to everybody's aquifers. Aquifers that I know of two of my neighbors on different sides of this property that have deep in their wells. Who's going to pay for that when you guys put a well on the site and use an industrial amount of water in order to have your landfill there? It seems ridiculous. So, and you guys use the scoring criteria, as the last lady mentioned, is very misleading. You guys list our property as agricultural, and this land uses as agricultural around it. And it gives it a better score in regards to having a landfill on it. Yet you mentioned that there's residents located by it. And there's in your guys' comments. And you can't have residents and agricultural. That's two different things in our location, because there are residents on those agricultural plots. That's most people's livelihood in that area, which is going to also be impacted by the pollution, the waste that's going to get into their livestock, their farming, and any other agricultural practices that they do there. The other big question I had was, there's a piece of property right to the south there. It's 453 acres, and it's not included on the list. And why is that? I'd love to know the answer. I'll ask it, I guess, for the fourth time. But I'm not trying to be hostile to you guys personally. I realize you guys have a process that you're trying to do. And I would love personally, me and my wife, and I'm assuming anybody else that's on my road, come take a look at our site. Come to my house, talk with me in person. Anybody on the Slack member team, I would love to show you around, see what it's like, so that you guys truly know and understand what you are messing with. Not, I mean, not threateningly, sorry. But as far as the landscape, as far as community, as far as the residents that live there, we're real people, This is our, everybody in this room's here for a reason. Go to all the other sites, talk to all the other people. Yeah, that's what I gotta say.
Thank you. Good job.
Brett Matthias.
That's me. Hi, everybody. I live at the end of Bear Creek Road, and I'm here representing my family, myself, and also the newly formed nonprofit called Preserve East Bend. We are here we have our legal team that's paying attention to this, as well as our group of citizens and our community, which we kind of get the feeling like people don't see us as a community out there because we're on these small ranches and farms and separate, but we are. And we have people of all sorts of diverse groups that live and work out there, retired police, retired military, lawyers, doctors, aviation professionals. I'm a construction manager, so that's what I do. And we're all passionate about where we live. I built my own house in my own hands 22 years ago, 10 acres. We've got irrigation, we raise cattle, we have raised my kids there, and the story is the same with everybody. This is valuable land that we love. It's clean, we got clean air, we got clean water, we don't have trash, we don't have problems that you see in town, whether it be homeless camps and things like that. We take care of our land. We're stewards of where we live. So my first question that I want to pose, and it's the same as Daniel's, is why are we looking at these two parcels out east, 8-10 miles from here, and you have 453 acres right next door to you? I talked to the listing agent last week. He said that no one's even approached him about it, even though he's reached out to Deschutes County several times in the last 2 years. There's 453 acres available. And if the centroid and the carbon footprint is so important, why aren't we looking at that instead of putting it out where it's going to destroy our neighborhoods?
Good question.
Okay, so my next item, I'm going to talk about some cost issues, and I'm surprised it's got this far without people looking at costs. But before I do that, I want to talk about a scoring item that I want to take issue with. It's the Hall Road impact. You've rated us as a 4, which is basically stating that only 6 to 10 residences will be impacted by the Hall Road. That can be further from the truth. Of course, we don't know what the Hall roads are because you can't even see the roads on the maps you were given. I'm able to get on dial and compare, but if you include 10 Bar Road, Bear Creek Road, Cougar Trail, throw in Byram and Bennett, we're looking at 105 residents minimum impact with this Hall Road. This score needs to go to a 1, and we need to get the appropriate accounting for that. Moving to my next item is cost of improvements. I work in the industry, construction, large construction jobs. I did a takeoff of the quantity of road, lineal foot. We have an ODOT intersection potentially, 10 bar and Highway 20. And we have 6.5 miles of roads, rural country roads, which will have to be upgraded. The upgrade cost of that is significant. We're talking about, we have many blind spots, many blind corners. The roads are small rural roads. It's going to need larger shoulders. It's going to need bigger pavement thicknesses. They'll have to be completely rebuilt. Tri-County Paving and I work together. We put together a number, and it's somewhere around $45 million to upgrade these roads. My question to you is, how did we get this far and not even look at the cost impact? And this is before you even build the landfill. This is before you build a 50 million yard giant landfill. This should be a part of it, narrowing it down to the final selection, don't you think? The cost. These are rural roads with citizens that are impacted greatly by it. All right. My last item on cost is the property value. I want to talk about that really quick. Easily 200 to 300, maybe 400 people impacted by that. This is some of the highest value land in Central Oregon. We're living in these small ranches. We have, like I said, the clean, serenity, all that stuff, clean water, clean air, high value land. Just look at my taxes. But Deschutes County thinks it's high value. My question to you is if indeed that landfill goes out to the end of there, and we all lose $1 million apiece. We're talking about a swing of $300 million. Where is that accounted for? Will the county be reimbursing us for our losses?
Amen.
I mean, that's serious dollars, right? Okay. I just want to close with, I think you know where we stand, 18-1300 Bear Creek Road. We're adamantly against the landfill at the end of Bear Creek Road, COID land. It's just a half a mile from the Badlands Wilderness. I have BLM that comes in behind my house. I have elk, deer, eagles, blue herrings come in my pond. We have so much wildlife. It's so beautiful. Our neighbors ride their horses out the back and ride all in through that area. It's one of the unique spots in Eastern Bend that is still protected, still beautiful. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep it that way. This is your chance to do things right, guys. You have an opportunity here. I think opening up BLM is a good idea. I think opening up state is a good idea. I can tell you from our standpoint at Bear Creek Road, and we feel the same about Rickard, completely wrong locations for a 50 million yard landfill. That's what is on the parametrics siting criteria, 50 million yards. Concrete trucks, 10 yards. Imagine that quantity. That's gonna be giant. Pump the brakes, slow down, even if it means extending this out. Even if you have to haul trash for a couple of years, let's do this right. Let's find the optimum spot. But I can tell you, 18-1300 is the wrong spot. Thank you. That's all I have.
Tom Diamond?
Yeah. Well said. Representing 180-1315, my property abuts. I have a couple of points that are going to start to become consistent with the other excellent speakers here. Our position is no landfill in or near a neighborhood that's existing. Differently, no landfill in harm's way. Harm's way. I've studied several years worth of the Title V reports that Deschutes County submits to the Department of to DEQ. In 2020, 2.38 tons of PM5, in other words, high particular or small particulate, the stuff you get out of wildfires, was emitted from the Knott landfill. Now I'm trying to figure out, what does that mean? I looked at the DEQ or EPA standards for air quality. Good air quality is 12 micrograms per cubic meter of air. 2.38 tons is 2.15 trillion micrograms. Now, I get it. I'm an engineer. That's micrograms that are going into cubic meters of air. But as a near-term resident, to be faced with ingesting some portion of 2.15 trillion micrograms of PM 2.5 every year is in harm's way. Property values, as was most well articulated here. I will just put a little bit of data behind it. A 2005 study by Dr. Richard Reddy from Montana State University cites that high volume landfills on average are subject to 13.7% depreciation in land in property value. And he then goes on to cite the gradient in depreciation the farther out you go from that landfill. To the point here, there are hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue in tax-based revenue that Deschutes County is themselves putting themselves in harm's way by citing a landfill where we know, based on academic studies, and he's just one, that there will be an immediate depreciation in property value. In the Rickard Road site, well over 100 neighbors who will be subject to that level. Please do not put this landfill in harm's way for the good of Deschutes County, for funding roads, for funding schools. To have that kind of impact to the tax base is in harm's way. And I believe that when you are next with the county commissioners, even though your assessment is largely technical, I believe it's important that you cite your own awareness of the economic harm that this is going to do in high density neighborhoods. I just want to make one more comment, which is not related. It's a concern and a request, and that is my understanding is that there's not been a decision made yet as to whether Deschutes County will run these operations or whether a third-party entity will be. To the extent that a third-party entity, we can guess maybe Republic Services, to the extent that they are currently involved with profit-related motives, and I don't know, I'm not trying to cast aspersions here. What I'm asking is, could there please be transparency beginning immediately as to the process for determining whether this will be managed by the county or managed by a third party who has different motives than the rest of us living in this county? And we should know immediately who's involved, if a third party is currently involved, and the process for sifting through to a final decision. And I would request that becomes immediately available to the public. So, thanks.
James Hussein.
Hi, Chad Buzian, very good. Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Buzian. I live on Bear Creek Road and speaking specifically about 181-300, but I want to acknowledge all the wonderful speakers that just went before me, did all the hard work. I concur with everything that's been said. I would like to add, I'm the president of Preserve East Bend, which is a new nonprofit entity. We have legal representation as well. And we've submitted letters and all kinds of written documentation. So more is forthcoming. I'd like to ask 3 questions and I have a couple of comments, so I'll make this brief. I went online, looked at the solid waste budget. I did not see a line item, proposal, grants, anything related to this project. Is there a budget and what is the funding mechanism? Would that be a no or?
Well, we budget on an annual cycle. We do have a long range forecast for our capital and needs in the budget for the department. And that's included in the financial stability budget each year. So it's not in a, there's a line item for the work that Parametrics is doing at this point. But as far as developing a new site, that funding is down the road.
Okay, so there is no budget that I can go online and look at and say it's 20 million for roads, 30 million. That doesn't exist yet.
The solid waste management plan advanced a $11 million budget. Actually, in our long range forecast, there's $14 million in the fund for that at the moment.
Well, and that's your current operating budget, though.
No, that is what we plan for use in, I believe, 2027 to begin.
Okay.
And that's just a long range forecast. It's really sensitive to where the facility ends up being.
Thank you. Okay, we'll look a little deeper into that. Has any of the members of this group, the committee, and thank you for your hard work. I know this is tough work for you, or Deschutes County commissioners or any other electeds been out to the Bear Creek Road site taken a walk across the COI land or any property out there, come to my property, you can come to Daniel's property, walk right onto the Badlands, which is contiguous. Has anyone been out there to see what it is you're proposing to put out there? Not yet? Okay.
Speak myself, I have not. I've been on the Rickard property.
Okay, well, hopefully we invite you all to come out and take a look at the federally protected Badlands, which is walking distance. Yeah, that's right next door. That's where we're gonna put this landfill, apparently. So there was a survey done, and some of the electeds I've read and heard speak pointed to 500 people responded to a survey. And I think the county is at 210,000 or 250,000. I'm fairly certain the company you hired was professional, but 500 out of 210 plus thousand seems statistically insignificant to me. And some of the questions that are on that survey, if you ask, do you want to manage trash in Deschutes County because it promotes better management, you might answer yes. If you want to reduce greenhouse gases, don't drive real far, you might answer yes. The question that wasn't asked, would you still answer yes if it was right next door to your property or in a neighborhood with $100 million property values?
Yeah.
So will there be a new survey based on the public energy that you're getting now? Can that be redone?
I suppose that's possible. That would be something for the committee. And I assume you're referring to the survey that was presented in the solid waste management plan.
Yes, and that launched, I think Commissioner DeBonne and others have spoken that launched the strategy that you're operating under to keep the centroid, keep it close. In other words, not look into Lake County or not look further out. So it kind of narrowed quickly your focus. So I'm just encouraging you, maybe we redo that. And then the last question and my two comments real quick. Can you guarantee that there's only going to be transfer trucks at these sites? The original premise was yes, but then at the last meeting we attended, the comment was, well, there might be local garbage trucks are also going to come to the site, and we're going to keep not landfill operating for composting and all the other projects, which is great. Can you guarantee only transfer trucks?
That depends on where the site is located.
Thank you. I mentioned, so my last two comments, and I'll yield the floor here. Thank you for your patience. So the distance to the centroid, I've heard that mentioned. And I'm open to our ecology and saving the environment and all of that. But nowhere in the mission statements of anyone or your plan have I seen the importance of human beings and people. Talk about the animals and everything, and I'm all for that, the air, right? I would recommend a paradigm shift on that whole thought process. You may need to kind of start from ground zero again, because if we want it close in, because 500 people said that, I've already challenged the survey, and you want to keep it close in, I'm not sure there's a lot of studies. I've heard folklore about if it's in your backyard, you're not going to throw bad things in there. But why did we already eliminate the future? Meaning, we're not going to be driving diesel trucks and gasoline trucks here pretty quick. Right. Freightliner is producing a truck, ironically named the E-Cascadia. It's an electric truck. So you guys could partner with Freightliner and get a big win in the media. But we should be thinking about you. I would encourage you to be thinking about not staying close to the centroid if it means impacting humans to this level of an extent. So you're not accounting for that. A regional solution for this complex thing that you're trying to wrap your arms around, everything has an unintended consequence. And there's an engineer that just spoke. You can analyze this thing down, but sometimes it's economies of scale that will actually help you get to where you need to be. A multi-county regional would leverage assets, leverage resources, leverage governments, leverage money. Then maybe you can actually effectively burn off your methane gas. I'm not sure that keeping it in Deschutes County, do you have the capacity to keep it here? Do we have the correct elected officials in place? Do we have the correct tax base to manage a 100 to 200 year asset? I would suggest you look broader picture. Then the last thing is, I just did a quick search. If you go to Visit Bend, you go to Deschutes County website, Visit Bend has a pledge that says it's a special place. Let's leave no trace. Sustainable future for the outdoors and protect our natural resources. Deschutes County Commissioners, go to their website. They have goals and objectives in their 2023 plan. Sustain our natural resources, including air and water quality. All these things are going to be impacted. And I want to support all of the environmental folks that are in here, seriously. I do want to make a little bit of a distinction. I live on the east side for a reason, and I'm very proud of that and very protective of it. I feel like we're not getting the attention we deserve out here. And what I mean by that is if you look on any of these maps, Sisters is protected, Tumalo, the tree farm, the west side, tons of money and energy and hours has been spent protecting the ponderosas and everything. Good, I'm glad. The east side has spectacular high desert Central Oregon features that are diminishing. It's unbelievable that we would be even considering putting a landfill next to the Badlands, which the US Congress said needs to be protected. So I would love to see that same level of energy and passion come out and take a look at our environment where we live. I know it's out there, but the more I see some of the decisions coming down the pike, I'm feeling like we're like the dumping grounds. And I'll leave you with that little word simile there. So thank you very much. I went over my 3 minutes.
No, you had 4 minutes.
Okay, thanks.
But you may have gone over that as well. Keith Harless.
My name is Dr. Keith Harless. I appreciate your effort on this difficult and unenviable task. I'm a retired pulmonary specialist, having lived here in Bend and practiced for 35 years. I also live within 1 mile radius of the proposed Rickard site. I strongly object to this or any other residential site being considered for a 100-year replacement landfill. In fact, I am shocked that you would recommend any nearby residential. Perhaps not shocked, because Rickard is owned by Deschutes County. Distinct disadvantage to us. But shock is the right word, because landfills are dangerous. By your own description, Rickard is zoned currently residential and planned residential. Currently, within a 1 mile radius, there's 100+ homes. Excuse me, you're considering a 100-year landfill placed immediately adjacent to a present residential area? I must remind you that landfills are potentially dangerous, as I said. There's a developing medical literature describing various kinds of lung cancers, and in children in particular, respiratory disease, as well as other diseases. In addition, there are clearly documented concerns for air, water, light pollution. The aquifer east of here, Rickard Road, flows north. Can you guarantee no leak for 100 years to that aquifer? If you can't, Bend, Redmond, Madras, domestic water is threatened. As we all know, Bend is growing. And we all know Bend is going to have to grow east, largely. Not entirely, but largely. So at this point in time, you have 100+ homes. Within, what, 20 years? You're going to have considerably more. Landfills have no place being situated near a residential area. You have other and better options. Parenthetically, I feel sometimes sage grouse are more protected than me. I believe it to be unconscionable of you even to consider recommending replacement landfill near Rickard or Bear Creek Road. Don't propose a solution that creates many bigger problems. Thank you.
Dr. Marlis, Matthew Hyman.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Matthew Hyman. I've been a resident since '91 here. I'm a property owner out in Milliken, Oregon. Own some recreation property out there. And I just want to speak to the naturalness of that area. It's just beyond Horse Ridge. It's at the base of Pine Mountain. It's a huge recreational resource for the entire area. As we start to see Smith Rock in north of town gets a lot of use, and we look to the west and the mountains. They're obviously getting heavily impacted. You have to have permits to do this stuff. So as the county grows, things are moving east, as our previous fellow mentioned. So you know, we have Pine Mountain observatories right there. These are really important resources for folks that are coming here to visit and folks that live here in Central Oregon. And I really wanted to stress the high visual impact of the location sites that have been chosen out there. It's all sagebrush. There's no trees. Like, you would see this thing from miles and miles away. It'd be the first thing you'd see coming over Horse Ridge. So there's really no way to, you know, hide this landfill. Of course, we have to put it somewhere, but I think right in those locations, you're not going to be able to hide it or put it in a place where it won't just have an extreme visual impact on the landscape. I think this is really important because you have the observatory, you have all the wildlife, and as the recreationists, there's paragliders, there's dirt bikers, there's the shooting range, there's mountain bikers, there's hikers, there's pictographs and the dry canyons. This is all very close, and I really do think that Milliken Valley is a huge resource for Deschutes County and for people that come here to visit and recreate. People will be moving east more and more, and I really think that little area is going to be the next hotspot for recreationists. And I just want to speak to that. All these different user groups that currently use the area, you know, I don't see a lot of them here, so I want to speak for all of these groups, and that area is of vital importance for Deschutes County to have these things. It will have an economic impact because people want to come here to visit and see these natural areas. We need open space with all the development here in Central Oregon. Everything gets cleared and more, you know, apartment complexes get put in, and we're starting to lose our open space. And I think just beyond the Badlands and Milliken Valley is one of our special places that it needs protection. Beyond that, you do have just health concerns for as more people move east, there's going to be huge health concerns for the wind. There's so much wind out there. So as you have a landfill site, it's going to impact all the users out there and the people that do have property out there. In the 7 years I've owned property out there, there have been dozens of people moving out there. The community is growing out there quite a bit. And certainly in 20, 50, 100 years, there's going to be a lot more going on out there. And I think to have, you know, it's maybe 25 miles east of town, but that's relatively close considering that this is a 100-year plan for the landfill site. So yeah, I would hope that you have a little broader
view of where and farther away potentially of where the site should be. And if not farther away, that it should maybe be in a more industrial area. I know there was the site in Redmond, and it's right next to, there's already an existing transfer site there. So it made me wonder, you know, maybe that's potentially a good site because it's within the 97 corridor. It makes, you know, travel expenses are going to be a lot less when it's already next to a transfer site. And I heard some stuff about the one just right next door here. So I'm kind of balancing those two. Do we put it farther away or keep it closer? So I have questions about those things. Overall, I mean, there's obviously the sage grouse and the antelope and all the wildlife combine areas that exist east of town, and Milliken Valley is one of a major area for all these things. It all really kind of comes together there, coming off the southern slopes of Newberry and crossing through Pine Mountain. All the wildlife for sure should be, you know, taken care of out there. It's a huge resource for Deschutes County to maintain that area. And just one little word about we have the telescopes are out there, and you know, the light pollution and the dust pollution that could be created from a landfill, that's a huge impact. These telescopes have been here for 30, 40 years, and there's not too many folks get the opportunity to, you know, view the night skies through these things. So it's, again, this is a resource we don't want to threaten by putting the landfill there. So I guess I just want to speak to just the overall quality of life in Central Oregon. You know, we are here for the nature and for the fresh air and for the, you know, the wonderful visual mountains that we get. And I really think that, you know, the site choices there is 191, 400, 3300, the Ford Road. It's right in the middle of everything. You're not going to be able to hide this. It's going to be a giant facility that everyone in Central Oregon will be impacted by. They'll see it every time they head east. The one that is also right next door is 201 500-300. It's right off the Pine Mountain Road. And again, these are huge recreational areas. You're going to drive right by the landfill to go up to Pine Mountain. And if you haven't been up there before, it's a wonderful place. You go take your children up there to see and view the stars. I mean, you can't do that in too many other places in the country. And driving by a landfill is not what folks in Central Oregon want. So on top of that, there are just concerns about the aquifer. Again, water is one of these resources that we're fortunate to have a lot of water around here and a lot of groundwater, and it needs the utmost protection. If this is a 100+ year plan, water should be at the top of the list of things that we need to take care of and have a strong concern for. So there's a whole list of other reasons that I could go through. So I'll just stick with that. And I just want to, you know, speak up for the Milliken Valley and the two sites there. Thank you.
Amanda Gold.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I just printed one copy for you to take a look at. So that's what I'll be speaking to the charts. I just want to start by thanking each of you. I recognize the time and the energy and the investment that you put into this. And so I just want to honor and validate that. I do want to say thank you to the speakers who've already stood up as well. And Dr. Harless, with my mom hat on, I appreciate what you speak of. Being a mom to an asthmatic son, I understand those concerns are very real. And so I want to echo that and say thank you. But today I just want to speak to 3 concerns that I would really like to address with the Rickard site. First and foremost, the preliminary data. So in the chart, you can see for the data from Parametrics. Thank you, Ryan, for your involvement. And my understanding is Parametrics is out of Portland, is that correct?
We have an office here.
You do, okay, thank you. So I have poured over the data, analyzed site by site to kind of do a side-by-side comparison analysis. And so in this table, you will see that I have itemized the sites by in the highest total score down to lowest score. You will also see that I have looked at the number of ones that was given for your ranking scale, 1 to 5, 1 being the worst score. And so speaking to the Rickard site 181315, It shows that Rickard is the second highest scoring across all the characteristics with a score of 3.82. But is also tied for having the most ones with a total number of 14. A large portion of these low scores occur in important yet very low weighted characteristics, which we've heard from previous speakers with your weighting, your scoring criteria. Some of those being residential, proximity to drinking wells, an unstable area, and poor foundation. So coming from an education background, I'm a school administrator. I come from a place of curiosity, and please help me understand, how does a site with the highest proportion of bottom ranking scores land in the highest portion of preferential sites?
Yeah.
So that's, and again, this is data. I call myself a bit of a spreadsheet geek. I've poured over several spreadsheets I've created to analyze side by side, and this was one that I just really, I would love some clarification around that. My second concern would just be your county goals and objectives. I have printed off and shared with you what you have posted on your website, which is your 2023 goals and objectives for Deschutes County. And I would like to speak to those. In the document, you outlined 5 key components of focus and value. 1 is safe communities. 2 is healthy people, enhancing and protecting the health and well-being of communities and their residents. 3 is a resilient county. 4 is housing stability and supply. So supporting actions to increase housing production and achieve stability. And the 5 is the service delivery, providing solution-oriented service that's cost-effective and efficient. So when I read that as a community stakeholder, I find it impossible that the committee could, in good faith, recommend a landfill to be on Rickard Road. The scoring identifies major characteristics of concern, and that would be in direct opposition to what your stated values and goals are as a public entity, again, per your stated values on your website. My third concern, my final concern, is the transparency and the lack of concern. Looking back on all of your presentations, which I appreciate that you have them posted publicly, that your landfill siting kickoff meeting held last April, you shared that the public outreach goals were as such: to be transparent, to share information countywide, to engage underrepresented communities, and to listen and provide opportunities for feedback throughout the siting process, and to use multiple engagement tools and methods. So I understand that there was that desire and that intent there. And as a stakeholder and a community member, and I think that what I've echoed and heard through other individuals is that there's been a breakdown in that transparency, and we would just ask for an increase of that. Some wonderings that I have, again, coming from a place of curiosity. I would love some explanation behind the removal of some of the West Bend sites plus the South Lapine sites. Help me understand where those were eliminated. I would echo the thoughts of, I would love some understanding of why the site South here has not been considered. I also would love some understanding around the 12 stakeholders that were interviewed and provided feedback. So my role as administrator, and I'm also sitting on a district committee currently, like you, to evaluate language arts adoption and looking at the curriculum. And as a public entity, so I'm alongside you in this, we have interviewed hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders, or stakeholders of parents, or stakeholders of holders or children, and the stakeholders of the staff that we work with. So I would agree with the statistical score of the concern that we're only looking at 12 stakeholder voices. That's highly concerning to me. And I would argue that that is statistically invalid. My concern would be, in that effort of transparency, we have to make sure that we are giving voice to the stakeholders that are directly impacted by this process. And the other concern I have as well would just be the communication plan that you outlined in your August 15 presentation. Again, in the name of transparency, to make sure that we are providing communication, as you say, share information countywide, rather than just the residents that are adjacent to the property itself. I'll end with this. Again, we share that public entity in common. You here with the county, myself with the public schools. And I would just ask that that we remember that we have an ethical duty to align our practices and our decision-making processes with our publicly stated mission and values, that we represent our stakeholders, they are who we work for, and that ultimately what's stated on your website and some of the data already, just again, making data-driven decision-making, making sure that our data aligns with our mission and values, and that this process goes hand in hand with what you agree with here at the Deschutes County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Lee Goodrich.
So I'm here to represent my opposition to the site 181300, which is Bear Creek. And what I would like to say is you're 50 years too late. And I would say the same thing about Rickard, you're 50 years too late. Our site is ringed with people on 5 of 6 sides. We have multiple wells, and the barrier that you're giving of a quarter mile to a well is inadequate according to the EPA, and I'm working with them right now. The site is between 2 airports. It's in the Bend Airport zone. It's also in the Juniper Airport zone. The Bend Airport is covered by federal regulation. The Juniper Airport is covered by state regulation. And in the Deschutes County Code, it's under airport safety zone. And I know I've heard from Tim this week, and I appreciate that. But landfills draw birds. And I've brought an article here that says there was 75,000 starlings at not landfill. And they have contracts to keep them killed because landfills draw birds and birds bring down airplanes. And I live right next door to both the Juniper Airport and this site. I fence line both of them. So I'm very, very concerned. I'm also concerned that the county doesn't own the land. COID owns the land. There's 843 acres there being proposed. If you divide that into 40s, which our zoning says you have to, each one of those 40s is worth $1 million. You're talking about $22 million just in land value for the COID land to buy it. At least, if that land is sold by COID, us as patrons out there are going to demand that they get a fair market value for that land, because we are patrons and that's part of our capital investment in COID. The infrastructure costs have already been mentioned for Bear Creek and 10 Bar. Those roads are small. I'm not going to go more into that. I would like to tell you that considering the airports alone, you're probably not going to cite this forward. There's law from the feds, there's law from the states, and there's law from Deschutes County that's going to stop you because you sit between 2 registered airports. And one bird strike lawsuit out there, you bring down one plane, it's going to cost you far more than the transportation costs that you would have incurred to go a little farther down the road to a decent site for a landfill. I'd like to say that the neighbors out there, I can see Rickard is also mobilizing. I can tell you we are mobilizing. The neighbors out there have money and they're willing to fight, and they'll fight. I'll tell you that this is a very busy airspace over top of us. We are under the leading edge aviation training zone out of Bend Municipal Airport. We have the Airlink helicopters and plane goes directly over us from Burns to the hospital multiple times a week. We have the Juniper Air Park traffic. We have general aviation traffic. We have smoke spotter planes that come out and crisscross that land every time there's a thunderstorm in the summer. We have commercial jets flying higher. We're on the route between Portland and Boise, Portland and Denver, Portland and Salt Lake, Redmond and Boise. We're right under the route. I would also like to tell you that our property has a pond designation adjacent to the site, designated wetland. So it's on the dial if you want to look it up where the Goodrich is, Scott and Lee Goodrich Revocable Trust. We have a wetland designated next door to it. I noticed that I heard at the very start of this that your goal was to be, the last time when they did the not landfill, was to be outside of town and far enough away. And I would like to tell you that this is not outside of town and it's not far enough away. The last thing I would like to tell you is that because we have this enormous pond that has been there for 50 years, it's a year-round pond and it draws wildlife, and we're one of the few water sources out there. And we have constant elk, deer, bobcats, coyotes, cougars, everything in our pond during the winter time because it's one of the few water sources. And the other thing I'd like to say, speaking of water sources, is in our neighborhood. I live on Skywagon. We're Cougar Trail and Skywagon. Already we're deepening our wells because there's no water. We're already deepening. That's a proven fact. And the last thing is I worked just this last year for an entire year with Deschutes County to go through the correct process to get a CUP to develop part of our ground out there. I can't go forward at this point. It would be a waste of money to develop a nice piece of ground out there right now with a proposed landfill next door. And I just want to say that I really, really appreciate the hard work that you do, but wrong time, wrong place on Rickard and Bear Creek. Thank you.
Mrs. Goodrich, Lee Goodrich,
Yeah.
Stan Goodrich.
Scott.
Scott, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I don't think my handwriting is up to snuff, so just let you know, thank you. We're not trying to shoot messengers here, but this is, of course, very personal to us. I want to take just a second to talk about that CUP process. We spent a year going through the process to be able to develop approximately an acre of our own ground for a building site. We spent probably $25,000. We had permit fees, we had surveys, we had soil surveys, we had deposits, we had filing fees, we had applications to receive an application, and finally, we were successful. This is a case study in why people are so frustrated with government and why government is not well trusted. With a stroke of the pen, Deschutes County expects to make a moonscape out of hundreds of acres. Just because. And it is frankly infuriating that I have to go through so much burden of proof and Deschutes County can just decide to do this. So anyway, I'm going to just take another second. The financial costs of this have been well stated. I want you to realize that you are not mitigating the costs by bringing it close to a neighborhood. You are shifting the cost to those of us who have to pay that price. Whatever residents you put this close to, we've already well established property values are going to drastically diminish. This is not the place. Neither Bear Creek nor Rickard Road. And frankly, I think a lot of the other sites should be eliminated also. As far as costs, you've seen one attorney here today. I know one group has engaged another attorney. I haven't at this point, but I want you to know if this comes into my neighborhood, I will be either initiating or joining litigation to keep this from happening.
Yes.
Anyway, so thank you for your time. I don't know if that's a comment on what I had to say. I really think you should eliminate the residential sites. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Scott. Steve Peter.
He's such a digger. He's such a digger.
Can you hear me from back here?
I can.
Man, fuck off, monkey.
So I'm a Central Oregon resident for 40 years.
Sir, hold on just a second. Let us
Let's see if we can deal with
see
this.
if we can
hack.
mute-
And mute all our-
Is that Mr. Lambert?
should be a
What are you
mute
looking
all.
at, dumbass? Huh?
And then you mute all. Are you the host?
Yeah.
Can we give him 1 minute to God, please?
Turn the volume.
Niggas, 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 niggas.
We have to hack soon. Well, I think we've been hacked. Yeah.
Yes, you have.
I think that'd be worse.
Could have been so much worse. At least it won't be such.
Turn the speaker down like you just said.
I'm sure there's only you.
See if this works. If we turn the-
Okay, I think we're ready to start again.
Sorry, Steve.
Can you hear me back here? Is this okay?
I can't.
Anyhow, I've lived in Central Oregon 40 years. I'm also a real estate agent, so some of you may think this is self-serving, but it's not. Several months ago, probably years, I took Patty Adair and the then landfill hire out to the Pine Mountain Ranch. Had it for sale. It's 3,400 acres. There's multiple tax lots. There's a Forest Service permit that has some of the most beautiful old growth ponderosas that I've ever seen, which would speak to this gentleman's comment. Unfortunately, at the time, and there still is, a sage grouse overlay on that. And I had hoped that the county would be able to muster resources and legal people, talk to the BLM, talk to ODF and W, and say, if we only need about 400 acres, can we mitigate that? Because there's thousands of acres. I've only seen one small band of antelope. I've lived out there now for a year and a half, about 150 yards elevated up off of the Pine Mountain Road. So I see the traffic. One afternoon last summer, I think it was a full moon or some whiz bang thing going on in the universe. There were like 30 cars that drove by. Okay. Once you get across the cattle guard on the forest, you don't see anything behind you. You wouldn't see a landfill site. I don't know where the Milliken proposal is. I haven't been able to find specifically tax maps that relate to that. But anyhow, we tried to sell the ranch. Patty was very favorable, as was the solid waste guy. And, you know, the buffering, there was a well on there. There's already a well. There were like 30 million yards of aggregate. One of the things the landfill people need is dirt. Because when you dig a hole and start putting in your garbage, you got to cover it up. Okay. We've got a lot of that out there. as far as the access, you zip up 27th Street, you hit the highway and you're out. No Rickard Road, no Bear Creek Road. You're not gonna have Jake Breaks raising Cain with people's quiet enjoyment. My concern is we weren't on the short list. And I was just curious why, thinking maybe because of the sage grouse issue, that was the problem. Trying to look here at anything else. Out there, you've got 160 acre minimums. So most of the houses, most of the residents out there are in an old subdivision that was a 10 acre minimums, and they're illegally. I guess that may be just about all I have to say.
Mr. Pierre, can I ask you, do you have a tax lot number? I
Not right off the top of my head.
yeah, I'm a little surprised.
It's owned by Stephen and Clancy Roth and Dave and Jeanette Roth. And when I've still got my sign up, it's off the market temporarily. But my thinking is there's not going to be a good place anywhere. The Bear Creek, the Rickard Road, I would argue against that. Bend is growing east, but there's kind of a demarcation when you hit that Horse Ridge summit. And I know there's even some sites on the map all the way out at Hampton. And that's another story. But I guess that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, just one last question. I'm not trying to stir anything up with the Milliken group. So there is a raw property that is on the list at this point, and you're talking about a different property?
I am, yeah. I don't know how we missed the short list, but we did.
The only theory I have at the moment is it could be in one of the fatal flaw zones. But I'd be curious to see specifically what tax line you're speaking of.
Well, if you look at the old town side of Milliken, the old abandoned store, and you go directly south on either side of the Pine Mountain Road is where I live, yeah. Thank you.
Steve Wright?
You guys can see me okay. I'm just gonna stay seated. That's okay. I'm Steve Wright. I own 15 acres of land and a small cabin out there in the Milliken Valley. A couple miles south of the old Milliken store. And there's two sites out there that are on the proposal. The first one is 19-1400-3300. That's off the Spencer Well Road. The other one's 20-1500-300, and that's the one by Pine Mountain Road. These two are right in the Milliken Valley. I mean, just right in your face, right in the dry lake bed. And both of them I looked up on the dial, the zoning on those. They have the landscape management combining zone on both those properties. And I believe the reason is because they're highly visible from Highway 20 and everyone going through there. It's all open, like Matt said, there's hardly any trees. You're gonna see them. So the landscape management zone, by definition, part of it is to maintain and enhance the scenic vistas and natural landscape as seen from the nearby roadways, rivers, and streams. Like I said, these sites are highly visible from Highway 20, Spencer Well Road, and Pine Mountain Road. Okay, also, there's a bunch of private properties, over 130 tax lots that are just to the west of the Pine Mountain Road or the Roth property proposed site. Most of these are private. There's residents that live there, they recreate there, they camp out there, there's houses, cabins, ranches. these people will all be affected by the landfill right here. The other thing is, one thing that Steve brought up is that these couple sections in there with all these private properties, actually, many of these are legal lot of records. They were divided in the late 1960s and mid 1970s, and they are legal as 5-acre parcels, 10-acre parcels, 15, 20s. Also mentioned the Pine Mountain Observatory is right there. They need clean skies, clear skies. Pine Mountain is also an area where hang gliders fly, paragliders fly. They've been doing it since the 1980s. We come off the mountain and we come down and land near Milliken generally, near the Milliken store. Flying is not compatible with landfills. They don't mix. Okay, wildlife in the area. I have seen multiple herds of antelope in the area. They come in there every year. They go up and down the Milliken Valley, back and forth. I've seen deer, I've seen bald eagles, Matt's seen golden eagles. I've seen sage grouse out there, certain areas. The other thing that I don't know if you guys are looking at in detail is the weather. Okay, the weather in the Milliken Valley is a lot different than Bend. It's a lot different even than on the northwest side of those Horse Ridges, down there by the Badlands. The weather up top on the Milliken Plateau or the Milliken Valley, the winds are very strong at times. They're extreme at times. In the summertime, you get these big dust devils that develop. And this happens in dry lake beds. And this is what happens. They'll form and they'll go up hundreds of feet, and you can see them from far away. You can see them from 5 miles away building. There's just like a factory, and they come down, and between those dust devils, they'll have the strength to pick up the garbage. And then all the extreme winds out there, they will move the garbage around. That whole valley is going to be full of garbage. Highway 20, you're going to be, trash going all over the highway, I believe. The other thing is, as far as weather goes, a lot of people don't know this, but it gets much colder at nighttime and early mornings in the Milliken area versus Bend. A lot of times it's 20 degrees colder. So if it's 20 degrees in the wintertime in Bend, it's 0 degrees out at Milliken. How does this play into, running the landfill and having trucks drop off stuff? I don't know all the details there, but you want to consider the weather and the temperatures and also the grade going, trucks and traffic going up the Horse Ridge grade. It's about a 2-mile long grade. It's pretty steep. And you got ice and you got cinders, and that area is shaded a lot because the walls are kind of high because they cut that road in there. So just to summarize, please, no landfills in Milliken. Thank you.
Steve, Rick Kristen.
Oh, hi, my name is Rick Kristen, and I'm also representing the Pine Mountain Milliken area. Pine Mountain Milliken area. And I was here at the last meeting on the 20th of December. And I spoke a little bit about the recreational opportunities out there. And the question is why was I at that meeting? Well, a friend told me about it. And I think we would have to have a building 5 or 10 times bigger than this if we would have all got some kind of letter. Now, my wife and I own a vacation rental downtown Bend. And every year we have to write 42 letters of all the houses around us to let them know what we're doing. Now, if you're going to put a landfill in that's going to last for 200, I don't know how many thousands of years, why can't we be notified? How many more people would be here? Another gentleman mentioned energy and passion. How much more energy and passion would we have right here if everybody that knew about this was here? Now, I'm going to speak about another area that I didn't speak about before. It has to do with the fact that there's a lot of flying going on out there. There's the Milliken Valley Airport. Well, we also talked about it had to do with the fatal flaw. A fatal flaw would stop this commission from continuing to view a site as part of a site for the landfill. And there's two fatal flaws out in the Milliken Valley. One of the fatal flaws is that there's a little airport out there called the Milliken Valley Airport, which is smack dab in the middle of the Milliken Valley. I'm a pilot. I use this airport frequently. So do other pilots around the Oregon area and from Idaho that are backcountry pilots. When we shoot our downwind base and final, we'll be flying right over this proposed landfill site. And mentioned earlier was the bird strikes. I myself have hit a bird before. Fortunately, it just hit the antenna. If it would have hit the windshield, it would have been fatal for me. So that's a fatal flaw for the Milliken Valley area. Another one is that I'm a hang glider pilot. I've been flying the Pine Mountain, Milliken Valley area for 40 years, along with 150 other pilots that fly the area. When you have a landfill site like this, and you have the methane fires that are created from the decomposition of the materials, these create violent thermals that are going up somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 miles an hour. If a hang glider pilot hits that, that's total death. You're gone, you're done. So this whole valley is going to be filled with these fires, and it will make the whole area unsuitable for hang gliding. Anyway, that's all I have for the moment. I'll be at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Frankie Watson. Frankie? She out there?
Frankie?
If she shows up, we'll switch back in. Steve Graywood?
Thank you, Chad. I was here to speak on behalf of the Ricker Road site. I think all the salient points have been covered, so I'll keep my time for that. I just want to thank everyone for their time and energy. I do have one suggestion to the committee. Perhaps due to the huge public interest in this, that we could find a more suitable meeting time, perhaps after hours, where you could get a much more suitable venue. Thank you.
Dean Bulmer? Sorry, I'm writing something down. Gene? Gene Bulmer. We have Shuey. All I have is Shuey down.
Hi, how you doing? Excuse me. My principal interests are critters and life. So obviously, I'm not flying crazy about it.
Can't hear you. Just speak up.
Sorry, my principal interest in life are critters and bikes. And I don't want a landfill near me. Big deal, nobody does. But I wanted to thank you guys for the work you're doing. I used to be a problem solver for an environmental company. Actually worked for the CIA. But I know that you guys have to put a lot of effort. I would not want to be sitting here. So, but anyway, I don't want to waste time. It seems to me that based on that Montana site, you're going to decrease property values in the Rickard Road area by something like $10 million. I don't know about this. Who pays for that? Anybody have an idea? Nobody, somebody, Wizard of Oz. Anybody know who pays the $10 million?
Only the property owners.
We do.
That's it.
Only the property owners. There's no defined obligation of the government for a taking unless there's something on the property owner's property.
Okay, which is critters and bikes.
Which is why the studies have been done, because there's been efforts to try to compensate people and to date.
They
nothing.
fail.
It's failed.
Okay, well, thank you. My question's answered. Good luck.
Thank you. How about Bob Schuer?
Good morning. I'm Bob Short. I live out near Rickard and Gosney. And me and my family are farmers. And my daughter and son-in-law especially are trying to make farming a go here in Central Oregon. And between the property we own and several properties that are either leased or in some sort of shared management, our operations impact maybe 200 or 300 acres out in this very area that we're talking about with regard to the Rickard site and the Bear Creek site. Excuse me. And I'm coming a little late to the party because we didn't get notified directly. We're just outside the 1 mile radius, but my sister who lives in Conestoga let us know. And so some of our neighbors have had very learned comments and significant research. I'm going to give you a quicker reaction as to the impacts on the current neighborhood. And clearly impacts to the water table and air pollution are significant. One of our selling points is that we are out in a beautiful, clean area where we grow crops and animals that are clean and healthy. A nearby landfill might impact that. The other comment that folks have observed is the impact on wildlife. I watch every year as the seasons turn, the deer and the elk migrate from BLM land through BLM behind us across some private property, but then through the county parcels for the Rickard Road and probably the COI property as well on Bear Creek. And that's a corridor across a semi-developed part of Bend that gets them to the Badlands. So I don't know if that's formally a formally recognized corridor, but I do think it's a significant asset to the local wildlife. In terms of farmers out there, I've mentioned the air and the water pollution. The other big concern would be the infrastructure. Right now, we've got stock trailers going up and down Rickard and Gosney and all the local roads. My son-in-law drives a tractor back and forth all the time. Those roads either need to be upgraded or, you know, there's significant potential there for overuse and vehicular conflicts between farm vehicles and trash hauling trucks. So frankly, that's a big concern. As Bend grows eastward, given the current state zoning laws, it seems likely that there will be more small farm and ranch and semi-rural parcels out that way. Those parcels, it's not just one person, although that's a very important one person or one family. There's a complex economic system of people that are actually farming and some are leasing, but everybody's buying fences and irrigation equipment and tractors and animals and feed. And that's a vibrant economy out there that I'm not sure is completely appreciated in the economic studies that you've done for the landfill. So I'm here to speak for the farmers and the owners of farm properties out there and say, you know, I think there's significant impacts that maybe we haven't considered yet. My thought is, and the point has been made by several others, actionable items for the committee. And thank you, by the way, for your service doing this. I know it's not always fun. And you're trying to harmonize a lot of competing interests. I know you have to follow a process. I think revisiting the weighting on some of the items like proximity to residences, proximity to wells would be a really valuable exercise to undertake. There was one person who pointed out that it has, although the Rickard site has one of the highest scores, it also has the most negatives. And there's good information there, I think. I have read that 80% of Deschutes County is federal or state land. I know that you are undertaking discussions with the BLM. I think that's a very, very valuable idea. And I would encourage that to move ahead. I don't know, I know the BLM moves with glacial slowness, but could the county swap land? You know, are there other transactional forms that might speed that process? Or we have a pretty good delegation in Washington between our Senate and Congress seats. Perhaps they can speed the process. And so revisit, talk to the weightings, talk to BLM, and finally, I think you got to go out further so you don't disrupt both what is already a vibrant community and will probably only become more so. But if you plunk the landfill right in the middle of Rickard or Bear Creek, that has, somehow I think the impacts are underrepresented in the current score. So thank you for your service. Thank you for your time. And I'm hoping that Rickard and Bear Creek will go down and get off the list. So,
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Buckner or Buckner?
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me from back here?
Yes, I can.
I'm a practicing board certified physician and a clinical assistant professor of internal medicine at Western University of Health Sciences. Some of my comments will echo or reinforce what Dr. Harless said. I endorse all of his points. I wish to speak specifically about the effects of residential proximity to landfills. Specifically, my comments will apply to site 181315 on Rickard Road, but basically any site you're considering within 1 mile of residences. The adverse effects, health effects of residential proximity to landfills is now well documented and frankly beyond reasonable dispute. It's well known and well established that these residential proximity to landfills can cause cancer, chronic diseases, and fatality. And the evidence is growing. Just this month, less than 2 weeks ago, there was a systematic meta-review published in the scientific journal Environmental Health, and reviewing a variety of different factors. It found that residential proximity to landfills is associated with, that is, in other words, causes lymphomas, breast cancer, bladder cancer, liver cancer, respiratory illnesses, and cardiovascular diseases. Other studies have found an association between residential proximity to landfills and stomach cancer or lung cancer, low birth weights, mental illness, and early mortality. With other suitable sites available that are further away from homes, there's no good rational reason to be putting a landfill as close as some of these sites are now that are now under consideration. You're looking for a 100-year landfill site. If you pick a site with residential proximity that is within a mile of residential homes, I worry that you're actually inviting decades of litigation for Deschutes County due to these health effects. I think that's not just, I think that pricing that could cost for the communities is foolish and heartless for those reasons. And I strongly recommend that you not consider any site with residential proximity. That would include the site on Rickard Road, 181-315, and again, any site within a mile of a residential community.
Thank you. We got done before 11 o'clock. We do have some chat people. I want to pull up some common questions. Yes.
I didn't sign up, but my husband and I have a
Okay.
letter that we were gonna, would I be able to read it?
Yeah. Can I have your name?
I'm Laurel Longman.
I'll get you to fill this out.
Of course.
Chad, I signed up as well. Oh, did I skip you, Dave? Hold on, let me see that real quick.
This will just take a minute.
Dave, I'm sorry, Dave, that was not it. Sure. Dave, why don't you speak? You can just fill that in. And
Fill it out later.
Sorry, I'll make my voice a bit first. I'm David Cheney. I'm one of the people that have been growing Bend by moving abroad, coming in here. So I've been in a lot of different places. My past background included moving 1 million tons of solid waste out of landfills or other waste areas into industrial processes to be able to recover them. So I have a lot of experience with landfills in Canada, the US, Mexico, Honduras. And my concern of the landfill process that we're looking at here, this isn't just a landfill question. I'm coming at it from an industrial profit kind of guy saying, okay, what was my little grid weighting scheme? And part of the things I would be looking at is how difficult would it be to get a permit? Typically in my world, it was 3 to 7 years to obtain a permit because I wasn't a county, I wasn't a government, I was an industry, and I always had concerns. So communities like this will often have issues, and the more issues they got, the more constraining the permit would be for the landfill. If you want a 100-year landfill, ideally it's in a place where you don't have too many constraints, because the more constraints is going to create less degrees of freedom on what you can or can't do. We frequently co-located waste recovery processes with landfills because you'd have an outlet for your waste that you couldn't recuperate. So I doubt a landfill will be a standalone operation. It will eventually become an industrial area because once people realize there's a landfill in the area, the barriers to entry have already been broken. It's almost one of the most difficult things you could do other than an incinerator. So a landfill is already tough. Once they break the ground for a landfill, that area will become industrial. It will chill any residential growth towards that direction and then accelerate the industrial piece. So my concern is I don't know how between this committee and the city of Bend looks at development. Where do they want their growth? Industry does need a home. Where should it be? Keeping in mind that a landfill, you may end up being the wedge that creates a de facto industrial zoning area and not just a landfill that you have to. That's my fear. I'm not going to reiterate all the other comments everyone else has made, but my biggest fear is that this is a wedge. Once you get a landfill, you just need the capacity to, if I came to Chad and said, hey, I could get you another 25 years of life because I can redirect some of that waste, it's very attractive because you know how hard it is to build a new landfill location. So I would want to have it situated in a place where really there is no encumbrance. There isn't as much public concern. So you got more degrees of freedom and you can really leverage that full 100-year term of the landfill.
Yes, I'll just take a minute. Thank you for everybody being here. And I'm Laurel Longman. My husband and I were submitting a letter, and I just want to read this one paragraph that I wanted to mention. A lot of things have been mentioned, but let me just read it. A study published by the Regional Income and Product Division of the Bureau of Economic Analysis, U.S. Department of Commerce, has the following fact. Speak louder. Okay. Ben's MSA population in 1969 was less than 30,000. And at the end of 2021, Ben's MSA population was over 204,000, a 590% increase in 53 years. The Knott landfill is about 200 acres as compared to the 369 acre site located at 181315 Rickard. The Knott location has been in service for about 50 years. The new landfill is stated as having a 100-year life service. I want to ask everyone and the committee, will the site at 181315 support a service life of 100 years? This is a Band-Aid. This isn't large enough, and I agree with the fellow gentleman that just spoke. What we're doing now is a Band-Aid. This is not large enough. We need to move out farther and make it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you make sure we get you? Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else that wanted to go on the? On to BR.
31 shots.
The chats will be documented. So.
Yeah. A lot there.
We'll accept all the chat and comments. Any last minute? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd like to. I'm Craig Miller, and I live about a half mile from the proposed Rickard site. But I think that Milliken, the Rickard, and Bear Creek are all very bad for wildlife. So that's what I want to kind of focus on. In particular, I think that it'll be very bad for the deer litter range because it's a wildlife corridor and wildlife area, and our deer population is decreasing as it is. So, and then in Milliken Valley, I think that there have already been significant impacts on sage grouse, and I'd like to, I think that they need to be protected as well. So that's my primary concerns there. Also, I was instrumental in helping get the Badlands designated wilderness. One of the big things about wilderness is solitude. That's one of the major aspects, and I'm not sure that has been brought up as far as its importance. And if there's a landfill nearby, especially the noise pollution could really affect that negatively. So anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, everybody. We are hearing what you have to say here. I'm sorry, Rob. This is the committee meeting.
Okay, no, I just want, this is an opportunity just to ask a couple of questions, or based on what we've heard. Is anybody here that wants to, people talked about Milliken, they talked about Bear Creek and Rickard. Is there anybody here that wanted to talk about another site that we haven't heard of, especially Redmond?
I was wondering if the Pirate Indians have been notified yet, have you gotten any response from them?
We have reached out to all the tribal representatives. Susanna left. She's coordinating that. And as far as you know, we have not heard any replies from any of them. We have reached out to all.
Sure. So I'm Dale Peterson. I'll talk into this thing and I'll use my Scoutmaster voice for you guys in the back of the room now. So you listened for over an hour of the not in my backyard argument, which you're going to continue to hear for years if we stay down that path. So I think as you go forward with this, you need to get that off the table somehow and quickly get to the point where you're talking about sites that aren't impacting residents. So your word cloud showed residents are important. Your opening statement said residents are important. But if you look at your weighting criteria, you have hauling at 60%. So hauling distance. So I'll call that the convenience and operating cost, because there is going to be an ongoing cost for going too far from the city. But we've got residential impact, I believe is like 15%, maybe it's 25%. So if you take that spreadsheet and you flip those numbers real quickly, you can do it. I think you'll find that your sites line up differently. So I would encourage you to do that. I took time to walk the 3 nearest sites, Rickard, Bear Creek, and Moon Pit. We haven't talked about Moon Pit gravel area. Maybe a reason for that, but obviously there's residents around the first 2. So 14 miles later, after doing my hiking, it's my landfill exercise program. I looked at the Moon Pit, and originally when I saw it on the map, I said, you're not really considering something right next to a wilderness. So that was going to be like off the table for me right away until I walked it and realized, okay, the land is already impacted. So it's been scraped. It's a gravel site. It's really ready to go already. So your development costs go way down. It's surrounded on 3 sides by a ridge. And on the west side, which is the wilderness side, as you're digging your big hole in the ground, you use that to build a big berm to protect the wilderness. So I think you have a site there. Now I see the things that are against it on your criteria is that it's 8 miles further than Rickard. It's privately owned, so you got to do that negotiation. And actually, that's probably 2 biggest things. So I think just take a look at your criteria as you move forward and make sure that residential impact gets a little higher on the list. And I think it'll change your.
So we moved it. We did receive 2 comments. We didn't tabulate it on here. They both focused on Badlands wilderness impact. And like the rest of the privately held sites, we will be meeting with the owners of this as well.
But nothing for Redmond.
No comments from Redmond. We have met with the airport and we need to follow up with them on a couple of issues and questions.
Is that within the 6 mile?
Well, again, the 6 mile radius has to do with a very specific set of laws that govern procurement of grants and the type of air traffic in and out of those airports. And again, when we spoke with the FAA in December of 2021, they told us neither of those airports qualify under the Ford Act where the 6 mile radius comes into play. We have revisited that with Brian Powder back. They're a federal agency like the BLM.
I believe we heard comments last meeting about Redmond site also being adjacent to the urban preserve for Redmond.
We did talk about the
future
internal
growth patterns, so that.
Yeah, we did speak about it internally, but we did not get any comments from anybody regarding that particular site. Yes, sir.
How could there be a process? You're saying that as of right now, those airports don't qualify for that 6 mile buffer.
That I don't know. Things may change.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yeah, but potentially. But if this is really a 100-year plan, Central Oregon isn't going to get smaller. I've lived here my whole life and it's just getting swallowed up. So it seems like in a 100-year plan, I mean, that is the airport on this side of the mountain.
Yeah. I do not know how to answer that.
No.
question. Probably something we could ask the FAA about. Before I go to any, I need to make sure we address the question. Thanks, Rob.
I just had a few suggestions based on the things we've heard here. We had several people asked about the 453 whatever acres south of town. I think it'd be worthwhile maybe to at some point have a little sheet explaining why that site wasn't considered with a map.
Yeah, I believe they're talking about the Rose Pit across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll recap.
And then
Screen.
it might, and obviously everybody here is concerned about residences within, close to the sites. It might be useful for the committee to have maps of each of the sites. Circles, going out a quarter mile, half mile, 3/4 mile, 1 mile, and then showing their residences as an analytical tool. And also include not landfill in that, so we can kind of see how that compares. And maybe the problems, if there's a way to document the history, the problems of not landfill and how they've related to distance. And a lot of people have brought up groundwater, and I don't know if we have the ability without going further studies based on existing information to kind of bring to the sites to summarize that in some technical way, you know, where.
That'd be for wrong. I mean, we have a long history of groundwater, not land.
Yeah, I think what we're hearing here is a supply question, right, about how it impacts people's wells, is different from the water quality impacts of the landfill itself, right? It's the withdrawal for use.
What about contamination from it though?
Well, that's what I'm saying, we're hearing both, but I think most of what we heard today was concerns about how use of water on the landfill site would impact surrounding wells, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And then, you know, it'd be great to get in a bus and go around and look at each of these sites quickly, but you have to start about 6 in the morning. You still be able to go all of them, but I'd be willing to do that. I don't know if we can do that and not violate or.
Fuck you.
We got it. JJ, the lower right, the little microphone.
What are you saying? Do it all the way down.
Very, very bottom in the gray tab,
In the
and
gray.
right next to the hours.
Last meeting, though, said that 90+% of the trash was produced.
So, I don't know if we can all do that as a committee without violating Oregon public meeting laws. Otherwise, if there's a way to make up a map for the committee members to drive around on our own. And look at that would be useful. You might turn left here, right, whatever.
Lunch at my house, breakfast at his.
Watch the mountains. Is there gonna be a march?
Yeah, we are planning on monthly meetings.
I think that was my list.
I'm sorry,
Yes, thank you. Lisa.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that all the members of the committee were also aware of, had access to the Bend Municipal Airport Master Plan is being worked on right now. Because they are looking at the master plan for that site, which as a growing airport might affect how they're classified by the FAA. So that's ongoing right now.
that helped answer your question.
I have one other question.
Sure.
Earlier, when you were speaking of this time frame that you had of so many years, 7 out, but then you were concerned with dealing with BLM people. What I had heard was that BLM, when they have property, and it is going to be a landfill, they have certain criteria, and it's just boom, boom, boom. If they're not that difficult to work with, but I'm getting the feeling from what you had said earlier that you're kind of dropping the idea of working with BLM because of the time frame. Can we extend the time frame?
No, we're not dropping it. You came in late, is that correct?
No, I didn't. I
Yeah,
was here.
so Commissioner Chang is going to be meeting with Senator Wyden in February to talk specifically to this issue. The conveyance process, either a land trade or a purchase, what the direct answer they gave me was 6 to 10 or more years to get through the process. That was,
So, and we have 7 years now, or are you concerned? Not, I guess going out farther would entail BLM possibly. I don't know, it's up to you folks, but I don't want you to feel, this is a 100-year project. These are lives. Do we have to stick it 7 years? I mean, can we make it 8 or 9 and still make it out to the BLM and make something work? Or?
so we would have to find an interim place to put our waste for that period of time.
Arlington.
Trans out of county transport, it's certainly an option.
Does anybody, has this committee contacted Lake County and what they are doing to do something in conjunction with them?
That question came up at the last meeting, and we have not heard anything regarding that regional landfill about 8 months. I have no idea what happened to it.
Is this committee looking at that interim plan potentially? If it makes sense to delay a couple of years and move someplace to put the waste, is that something that's being considered?
Not at this point, but if it continues down that track, it's certainly have to do with our waste. It's not going to stop.
Right.
Yes, sir.
At the last meeting, I think there was a stat thrown out of 90+% of the trash in the county is produced along the 97 corridor. I don't know if I got that right or not, but I believe that was the
That
statement.
didn't come from us. That may have been somebody that was providing comments.
There were
I
a
have
couple of
not-
comments. One was that it's roughly $2 million per 30 miles of hauling. Does anyone remember this from the last meeting? Other than me? We talked about that, but my question is that if indeed that is true, that most of the trash is produced along the 97 corridor in the county, the optics of producing the trash in this area and then hauling to someplace that doesn't produce trash, it's the whole not in my backyard thing. We're not taking the accountability for the trash that we produce. Having a landfill close to my house in Virginia, when I lived in Virginia, we started importing trash from New York City, and we found that the trash that was coming from New York City was much higher in paints, automobile oil, and things that really shouldn't be going in a landfill. And the concept here is that when it's not in your backyard, you don't really care about what goes in the landfill. And it just would seem that you would want to locate the landfill where the trash is produced. It doesn't necessarily have to be in somebody's backyard. There are plenty of industrial areas along the highway corridor, the 97 corridor, where I believe most of the trash does come from. But some accountability is, the optics look better than, say, hauling it out to the Indian reservation.
I don't disagree with that. When we did our initial site screening, land along 97 corridor is not readily available for our particular needs. Were you at the last meeting?
Yes.
Okay, we included a map that there are metrics that I can see yet. Throughout the county. And if you look at the 97 corridor, they were fairly limited except for south county, but shallow groundwater is an issue.
One of the sites at the last meeting that was eliminated fairly quickly was a western site west of Redmond. And it was limited because there's a housing development or development that is going in that area. I believe it's, I can't remember the name of the development. But so the site was eliminated. There's actually no houses there right now, though. Perhaps it would be easier to move it to a site that's closer to where the trash is, that doesn't require as much hauling. And there are not yet houses there, and just not do that development, pay that developer off.
That is the site of the Thornton development
I think so, yes.
on Pine View. So it's already in under.
Last question.
I would like to make a recommendation. If there's a need to replace one of the citizen members for whatever reason, or you decide to add another member, it would be very wonderful to see a woman be picked, because you have all of them, all the citizens are men that I saw on the December 20th notes. And as you heard today, there's a lot of knowledgeable, articulate women that I think could enhance your operations. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. I know.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah.